Hello everyone and welcome back to yet another video on international business environment. So today in this video we'll be understanding the concepts like WTO, IMF and the tariff and non-tariff barriers, etc. Right? So let's begin. Let's understand what is WTO. WTO means the World Trade Organization. It is the only global international organization dealing with the rules of trade between nations. We all know that. WTO agreements are negotiated and signed by the bulk of the world's trading nations and ratified in their parliaments. The goal is to help producers of goods and services, exporters and importers conduct their business, right? So the World Trade Organization is the international organization whose primary purpose is to open trade for the benefit of all. So there are a number of ways of looking at the WTO. It is an organization for trade opening, basically. It is a forum for governments to negotiate trade agreements, and it is a place for them to settle trade disputes as well. So it operates a system of trade rules. Essentially, the WTO is a place where member governments try to sort out the trade problems they face with each other. It is run by its member governments, of course, and all major decisions are made by the membership as a whole, either by ministers, who usually meet at least once every 2 years, or by the ambassadors or delegates who meet regularly in Geneva. So these agreements are WTO agreements are lengthy and complex because they are legal texts covering a wide range of activities. But a number of simple fundamental principles run throughout all of these documents. These principles are the foundation of the multilateral trading system. Let's understand another concept, that is IMF. International Monetary Fund is an organization of 189 countries working to foster global monetary cooperation, secure financial stability, facilitate international trade, promote high employment and sustainable economic growth, and reduce poverty around the world. So created in 1945, the IMF is governed by and accountable to the 189 countries that make up its near global membership, right? The IMF's primary purpose is to ensure the stability of the international monetary system, the system of exchange rates and international payments that enables countries and of course their citizens to transact with each other. So the fund's mandate was updated in 2012 to include all macroeconomic and financial sector issues that bear on global stability. So the IMF's fundamental mission is to ensure the stability of the international monetary system. And it does so in three ways: keeping track of the global economy and the economies of member countries, leading to countries with balance of payment difficulties, and lastly, giving practical help to members, right? The organization and finances. The IMF has a management team and 17 departments that carry out its country policy, analytical, and technical work. So the one department is charged with managing the IMF resources. This section also explains where the IMF gets its resources and how they are used. What is the governance structure? The IMF has evolved along with the global economy throughout its 70-year history, allowing the organization to retain a central role within the international financial architecture. The next concept is World Bank. The World Bank, of course, is like a cooperative made up of 189 member countries. These member countries or shareholders are represented by the Board of Governors, who are the ultimate policymakers of the World Bank. So generally, the governors are member countries, ministers of finance or ministers of development. So they meet once in a year at the annual meeting of the boards of governors of the World Bank Group and the International Monetary Fund. So these governors delegate specific duties to 25 executives, director who work on site at the bank. So the five largest shareholders appoint an executive director, while other member countries are represented by elected executive directors. This is how the appointment is done. Now the World Bank consists of five organizations. We'll understand them one by one. The very first one is the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Now, this organization lends to governments of middle income and credit-worthy low-income countries. Next is the International Development Association. It provides interest-free loans called credits and grants to government of the poorest countries. Together, IBRD and IDA make up the World Bank. These two together, basically. The next one is the International Finance Corporation. The International Finance Corporation is the largest global development institution focused exclusively on the private sector. So they help developing countries achieve sustainable growth by financing investments, mobilizing capital in international financial market, and providing advisory services to businesses and governments. The fourth one is the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency. It was created in 1988 to promote basically FDI, foreign direct investment, into developing countries to support economic growth, reduce poverty, and improve people's life. So this Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency fulfills this mandate by offering political risk insurance guarantees to investors and lenders. And the last one is the International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes. It provides international facilities for conciliation and arbitration of investment disputes. Now let's check what are UNCTAD tariff and non-tariff barriers. But before that, let's see what is the UNCTAD. Now, the UNCTAD stands for United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. It was established in 1964 as a permanent intergovernmental body. UNCTAD is a part of the United Nations Secretariat dealing with trade, investment, and development issues. Now, a tariff. Tariff is a tax imposed by a nation on imported goods. No matter how it is assessed, any tariff makes imported goods more costly, we all know that. So they are less able to compete with domestic products. So protective tariffs make imported products less attractive to buyers than domestic products. So this is the main aim behind it. Now there are two types of tariffs. Now first one is a special tariff. A special tariff is levied as a fixed charge per unit of imports. Like for example, to give you, the US government levies 51% specific tariff on every wristwatch imported into the US. Thus, if 1,000 watches are imported, the US government collects $510 in tariff revenue. And also it makes the imported goods costly. So they are like less able to compete with the domestic products. So that's the reason behind it. So specific tariffs are computed on the physical quantity of the goods being imported. Remember this, okay? So it will help you to compare with other tariffs that we'll study. For example, Australia's 2005 schedule includes a tariff of 1.22 per kg dollar on certain types of cheeses, and the United States charges $0.68 per live goat. So these are how the specific tariffs are levied on the physical quantity of the goods, right? Next is ad valorem tariff. The most common is an ad valorem tariff, which means that a custom duty is calculated as the percentage of the value of the product. Now, what is the difference between the specific tariff and ad valorem tariff? Specific tariff is levied as a fixed fee based on the type of item, such as the $1,000 tariff on a car. But an ad valorem tariff is levied based on the item's value, such as 10% of the value of the vehicle, right? So mixed tariffs are expressed as either specific or an ad valorem tariff. rate, depending on which generates the most or sometimes least revenue. For example, Indian duties on certain rayon fabrics are either 15% ad valorem or rupees 87 per square meter, whichever is higher. So it depends. Next is compound tariffs. It includes both ad valorem and a specific component. For example, to give an example of like Pakistan charges 0.88 rupees per liter of some petroleum products plus 25% ad valorem. So there are it has component of both the tariffs, as specific as well as ad valorem. So tariff rate quotas are made up of low tariff rate on an initial increment of imports, the within quota quantity, and a very high tariff rate on imports entering above that initial amount. Right. So these were about tariff barriers. Let's understand non-tariff barriers. A non-tariff barrier is a way to restrict trade using trade barriers in the form other than tariff, right? So non-tariff barriers includes quotas, means a limited quantity of a particular product which under official controls can be produced, exported or imported. It is quota. Or embargoes, that is an official ban on trade or other commercial activity with a particular country. Totally ban, right? Next is sanction, that is a threatened penalty for disobeying a law or a rule, and levies, like levying of a tax, fee or fine. So as part of their political or economic strategies, some countries frequently use non-tariff barriers to restrict the amount of trade they conduct with other countries. Right? So let's find out these tariffs in an elaborate way. So first one is licenses. So countries may use licenses to limit imported goods to specific business. If a business is granted a trade license, it is permitted to import goods that would otherwise be restricted for the trade in the country. Quotas. These are countries often use quotas for importing and exporting both goods and services. So with quotas, countries agree on specified limit for products and services allowed for importation to a country. So in most cases, there are restrictions on importing these goods and services until the country reaches its quota, which it can set for a specific time frame. So additionally, quotas are often used in international trade licensing agreements. Next is embargoes, are when a country or several countries officially ban the trade of specified goods and services with another country. So governments may take this measure to support their specific political or economic goals, depends. Next is the sanctions. Country impose sanctions on other countries to limit their trade activity. Sanctions can include increased administrative actions or additional customs and trade procedures that slow or limit a country's ability to trade. Right? Last is voluntary export restraints. Now, exporting countries sometimes use voluntary export restraints. So, voluntary export restraints set limits on the number of goods and services a country can export to specified countries. So, these restraints are typically based on availability and political alliances, of course. So, to more study more on it, I've given you a link. You can go to this link and you can find out more information on tariff and non-tariff barriers, right? To study, you can click on the link. So some of the examples of non-tariff barriers. So in December 17, the United Nations adopted a round of tariff barriers against North Korea. The non-tariff barriers included sanctions that cut exports of gasoline, diesel, and other refined oil products to the nation. They also prohibited the export of industrial equipments like machinery, transport vehicles, and industrial metals to North Korea. So the intention of these non-tariff barriers was to put economic pressure on the nation to stop its nuclear arms and military exercises. So sometimes it's all political, right? The next concept is balance of payment, balance of payment account. Now, the balance of payment account is a systematic record of all economic transactions between residents of a country and the rest of the world carried out in a specified period of time. So to put it briefly, a balance of payment account is a summary of international transactions of a country for a given period, that is financial year. So it records a country's transactions with the rest of the world involving inflow and outflow of foreign exchange. So in short, a BOP account is a summary statement of transactions in foreign exchange in a year. So simply put, BOP account is a statement of a country's sources and uses of foreign exchange, in which main sources are exports, transfers and remittances from abroad, borrowing from abroad, foreign investments, whereas uses of foreign exchange are imports, transfers to abroad, lending abroad, and purchase of assets, etc. So BOP account, like a typical business account, is based on double entry system, which contains two sides, credit side and debit side, as we all do accounting. So any transaction which brings in foreign exchange or currency is recorded on credit side, whereas any transaction that causes a country to lose a foreign exchange is recorded on debit side. So for example, export is credit item as it brings it in foreign exchange, whereas import is a debit item since it causes outflow of foreign exchange. Understood? So similarly, borrowing from rest of the world is a credit item, while lending to rest of the world is a debit item. The main purpose of BOP account is to know international economic position of a country and to help the government make appropriate trade and payment policies. That's the main aim that BOP is maintained. So what is the significant importance of BOP? So balance of payment of a country is the difference between all money flowing into the country in a particular period of time, that is quarter or a year, and the outflow of money to the rest of the world. So a country's balance of payment reveals various aspects of a country's international economic position. So balance of payment presents the international financial position of the country, of course. So balance of payment helps the government in taking decisions on monetary and fiscal policies on the one hand, and on external trade and payments issues on the other. In case of a developing country, the balance of payments shows the extent of dependence of the country's economic development on the financial assistance by the developed countries. The greatest importance of balance of payment lies in its serving as an indicator of changing international economic position of a country. The balance of payment is the economic barometer, which can be used to appraise a nation's short-term international economic prospects, to evaluate the degree of its international solvency, and to determine the appropriateness of the exchange rate of country's currency. One of the most important measures in regard to international economics is balance of payments. Think of it as a national accounting measure that looks at the flow of goods and services into and out of an economy in a given period of time. It also shows capital flows into and out of a country. So positive current account balance indicates that a nation is a net lender to the rest of the world, but the negative current account balance indicates that it is a net borrower, right? So the next topic is current and capital account components. The BOP is divided into three main categories: the current account, the capital account, and the financial account. Within these three categories are subdivisions, each of which account for a different type of international monetary transactions, of course. So the components of current account, like the current account on the balance of payment, measures the inflow and outflow of goods and services, investment incomes, and transfer payments, of course. So the main components of current account are trade in goods, visible balance. Examples may include trade in goods such as oil, machinery, food, clothes. For example, visible exports can include selling of tangible goods which can be touched and weighted to other countries. Next is trading services, that is invisible balance, that is insurance services. Investment incomes, for example, dividends, interest, and migrant remittances from abroad. And last is net transfers, for example, international aid. Components of the capital account. Capital account of BOP records all those transactions between the residents of a country and the rest of the world which cause a change in the assets or liabilities of a residents of a country or its government. So it is related to claims and liabilities of financial nature. The components of capital account include foreign investments and loans, banking and other forms of capital, as well as monetary movements or exchanges in the foreign exchange reserve. The capital account flow reflects factors such as commercial borrowings, banking, investments, loans, and capital. Right? Now, next topic we'll study is International Financial Reporting Standards, that is IFRS. So IFRS sets common rules so that financial statements can be consistent, transparent, and comparable around the world. So IFRS are issued by the International Accounting Standards Board, that is IASB. Now they specify how company must maintain and report their accounts, defining types of transactions and other events with financial impact. IFRS were established to create a common accounting language so that businesses and their financial statements can be consistent and reliable from company to company and country to country. So let's understand IFRS. IFRS are designed to bring consistency to accounting language, practices and statements, and to help businesses and investors make educated financial analysis and decisions, right? So IFRS Foundation sets the standards to bring transparency, accountability, and efficiency to financial markets around the world, fostering trust, growth, and long-term financial stability in the global economy. So companies benefit from the IFRS because investors are more likely to put money into the company if the company's business practices are transparent, right? So IFRS are used in at least 120 countries as of March 2018, including those in the European Union, EU, and many in Asia and South America. But the US uses GAAP, that is generally accepted accounting principles. So IFRS are set of international accounting standard boards, an independent body of IFRS Foundation. It provides updates, insights, and guidance on the standards, right? So this is all about today's video. We'll have more topics on international business environment in another video. Thank you so much.